studios at the drop of a hat can pull a movie, change an episode, change the music, eliminate part of an episode, edit an episode, edit dialogue. They can do any of that at any time they want.
Greedo shoot Han first. Yep.
Whatever they want to do.
Yep.
They can do it today. So you could see a movie in theaters, and this is true. This really happens right now. You can see a movie in theaters, and 30 days later, you go to watch it on its exclusive theater at home access window for $29 or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Might be a different movie.
Yeah.
Slightly.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Matt Osterman, host of the Repellent Podcast, and today we're talking with Jeff Hayne, VP of Acquisitions and Production at one of the nation's largest film and TV distributors. Not only is Jeff a huge advocate for film and TV, especially physical media, but his incredible story of an accident that left him in a wheelchair will leave you inspired. Please enjoy my conversation with Jeff Hayne. But before we start, we have a favor to ask. If you happen to enjoy this show, we'd love it if you could like and subscribe on whatever platform you happen to be getting this from. We put a lot of work into putting these together and would be very grateful if you could make those 1 or 2 little clicks to show your support. Now on with the show.
I know you have a really cool life story, and we'll get into it, but we're going to start with a really hard question first. What is film distribution?
Film distribution, I would say, in a nutshell, it's a way of connecting filmmakers with a paying audience, whether that's a retail shelf, at a Walmart or a Best Buy or a Target or anywhere else, or a virtual shelf, iTunes, Google, Vudu, all those places.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously film distribution is getting, very, I will say, gray in terms of, the best path possible for distributing your film. A lot of filmmakers are making films these days, as we know, just for subscription on-demand platforms like Netflix. And a lot of filmmakers, the Tom Cruises of the world, are still insisting on a traditional windowing approach to distributing their film. So film distribution is just that. It's getting your film from the filmmaker's hands and into the consumer's hands.
Yeah, and I'd love to get into some of those details too about where we're at and where we're going, because it's changing pretty quickly. You lead acquisitions and production for Mill Creek. Can you tell us a little bit about the niche that Mill Creek has really carved out and where they're going?
I like to think of Mill Creek as kind of like a college rock station, in the sense that you're going to have kind of the big tentpole classics, and you're going to have new, never before heard or seen content. And that's really what Mill Creek is all about. We have a stable, a catalog, if you will, of like the best hits in history of television. And we've got a stable of a huge library of films that we've licensed from the major studios, that they weren't either paying attention to or just had kind of run their life cycle within the studio framework. And so we look at it with a new perspective, new lens. We'll do, first time release on Blu-ray. We'll do special edition steel books, right, on the physical goods side for consumers. For independent filmmakers, we do kind of the soup to nuts distribution. So everything from digital solicitation to Netflix and Hulu and HBO and Starz and Showtime and all those kinds of places, all the way to traditional retail distribution as well.
Yeah. Have you heard the Warren Buffett cigar butt theory of business?
I'd love to.
So when he was younger, getting started, he kind of postulated the theory that actually when he was a youth, people would smoke cigars. Before they'd finish, they'd throw the butt on the ground. But there's a lot left in that cigar to smoke. So he'd go collect them, and he and his friends would smoke them. But he took this to the business world, where a lot of businesses would be abandoned too early, or maybe the leadership wasn't quite maximizing, their value. But it seems like there's a lot of, like, especially on the TV side, a lot of those like 80s and 90s show that have like a lot of big fans at the time. But Mill Creek does a really good job of picking up some of those shows, right, and distributing them on DVD and Blu-ray, and you've done pretty well doing that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think a good example is, that 70s show. When we released that 70s show, it had already been released as a complete series by Fox, and then another company, they've been gone for 20 years or more now, but it was an independent distribution group that had the rights for a few years. And when the rights became available, I said, those are very valuable to me. I would love it. And Carsey Werner was kind of surprised that I was so excited, but I took their whole library. And, from the time we started our distribution till now, as it has just ended this last September, We sold over 500,000 copies of that 70s show in various
crazy.
formats. We did collections like, the very best of that 70s show holiday episodes. We did, the Kelso episodes. We would do these collections and we would make them inexpensive for consumers to buy. And then we would squeeze you for a higher price on that complete Blu-ray set, we would make it a special edition. And we had like a cover that had like that flocked velvet on it, right? And so
fancy, yeah.
we make something for the everyday consumer who's just heard of the show and was like, oh, I love the holiday episodes. So they get up for $5 in the value bin at Walmart. And then you've got the other end of the consumer who's in Best Buy and it's like, oh my gosh, special limited edition, Best Buy only. There's only a few thousand of these in the world. I need to have one for $250.
Yeah.
So the reality is that a lot of consumers, and I think, I use my brother as this anecdotal example. He was asking me about, Airwolf. He loved that show growing up. He loved that. Our father was a helicopter pilot, right? So any shows that had to do with military and helicopters were a win for us, but he just loved the show. And he said to me one day, he's like, oh, you should put that out. And I was like, what are you looking over my shoulder? I'm about to put it out. I'm releasing it now. I said, but it's been out before. And he was like, nah, I've been in Walmart like at least 20 times looking for it in the last couple of years and it's never been there. So you have to consider the general consumer, ideology that if it's not on the shelf, it's not available.
Right.
Yep. So for me, it was about finding the audience who just hadn't seen it the first time and finding a unique way to market to that audience through social media.
Yeah. Well, and now with the digital platforms too, how content kind of comes and goes. Like you might be watching a show that you really like, and it might be here today, gone tomorrow.
Quantum Leap.
Yeah.
When we released Quantum Leap, it was streaming on Netflix, and then it came off of Netflix and went on to Hulu, and we still did relatively well with it. We did 15 or 16,000 units on our Blu-ray set, which was a win for us. And then it came off the streaming platforms, and I think that was because Universal was kind of pulling it back from the streaming platforms, preparing for the new version of Quantum Leap. Well, when they pulled it off of the streaming platforms, I started selling 10,000 copies a week.
Wow.
For like 9 months. And then it went back on streaming platforms and my sales absolutely tanked. And what's interesting is that, I don't necessarily know how much money they made from the streaming deal, right? Probably not a lot.
Probably not.
I can't imagine they got more than $500,000 or $600,000 for the rights for 18 months or 2 years. And you think about the fact that I was doing that much a quarter on the physical goods side, it probably would have, benefited them to pull it off of any and all streaming platforms altogether.
Yeah.
But that's not their, mentality is they've got to gain subscribers.
Yeah. What's crazy to me is that's a 40-year-old show.
Yeah. So
probably, I don't know.
35.
Yeah. How many seasons did it run? Maybe 3 or 4. I have no idea. Maybe 5. I don't know.
5. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good one. And the fact that there's still so many people that will pay to have that in the library.
Why is it that 40-year-old, 30-year-old content still resides so heavily in consumers' minds? To me, it's because at the time, film and television was not a throw it at the wall and see if it sticks business. It was really carefully curated and tested with audiences to find out what they liked and what they wanted out of their entertainment. And because every day we all showed up at the office and talked about what we saw on TV last night, there was kind of a higher standard for content than there is now, in my personal opinion. I watch a lot of content that is based on a wonderful concept. And as long as they make a first episode or 2 that are pretty good, they stop caring about the rest of the episodes once they've got their audience kind of locked in.
Yeah. And Scott Bakula helps.
It helps to have a talent, right? And like we've talked about, I don't think there's as much curation of talent as well. Like, there used to be, staples of actors that stayed true to this, certain studio that they worked with for long periods of their career. And the agency that they worked with had major ties to that major studio as well. So,
Well, they say the age of the movie star is dying.
And it's kind of sad in some ways. I mean, in some ways it's invigorating and it's interesting and it kind of creates more opportunities for filmmakers, right? But at what cost? You know?
Yeah. Is this, us old guys looking back fondly, sentimentally on the past, saying it's not the same anymore, or have we lost something?
Right. And I don't know the answer to that question.
I don't know if anybody does.
I know that with all these streaming services, there is absolutely a desire from consumers to have it consolidated. So what we're going to see is all these streaming services become exactly like cable packages. You'll pay $75 and you'll get all of them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So to me, we've just gone in a big circle for absolutely no reason outside of the studio's ability to, directly monetize their content with consumers. But I think you're losing a lot of people in the middle there that were very helpful in terms of getting the word out about the content and also helping, sharpen the edge, if you will, on the quality of that content.
What does your typical day look like?
Okay.
If there is a typical day, there probably isn't, but if you could invent one for us.
Typical day is, wake up and the first thing I do is check my email and Teams messages from all the California folks, because a lot of the people I work with are in California. There's also a portion in New York, but they're kind of spread out across the country. So I'm looking at messages from all my team members and seeing what's going on in the world. And typically I will also in the mornings is when I do a lot of my correspondence, email and phone calls and all that kind of stuff. And then the afternoons I always try to reserve a little time for watching screeners and trailers. I will say during the day that's always consolidated. Like I'm not watching a whole movie during my day. I will typically wait till the evenings to do that. And it's funny because my wife will be like, are you watching a movie for work or are you watching a movie for fun?
Do you? I used to get the thing where if I watched a movie during the day,
Yep.
I'd feel guilty, like I'm not working. And then I have to remind myself, like, I'm a filmmaker. I've been paid to do this before. I get to do that.
Yeah.
Did you ever have that problem? Or
absolutely. Still battle with that issue because I love movies, right? So it feels like it's like a guilty pleasure, doing my job.
Yeah, totally.
But what's funny is that when I moved to Minneapolis, so I originally started doing acquisitions and productions in LA, and I moved to Minneapolis, and everybody I worked with in the office, they were distribution people. They were sales people. The fact that we sold movies wasn't necessarily novel to them. We could have been selling,
widgets,
nuts and bolts and widgets, right? So there was times when I'd be in my movie, or in my office watching a movie, and someone would come by and be like, well, it must be nice. What are you doing? What are you watching? And it was like, I'm considering this for distribution,
Yeah.
So I had to kind of like bring them up to that level, like we distribute art. And so we have to look at that art prior to distributing it to get an understanding of what it is and who our audience is. So yes, absolutely. I battle with that.
Yeah. That's funny. What's one thing that everybody gets wrong about the distribution industry?
That's a good question, and I don't think everyone gets it wrong. But I think there's definitely, there's this idea that you have to make a deal with a big major studio to get your film, into the marketplace, and or that there is no money in distribution because so many people have been burnt. My best partners and clients are people that have been burnt in the past.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like a group home for filmmakers who have been burnt in the past, because there's not a single movie we've ever distributed where we didn't meet our obligations.
Yeah.
When it comes to reporting,
Yep.
making payments. I've been in the business just with Mill Creek Entertainment. I've been there 17 years, and in 17 years, we've never skipped paying a filmmaker because we didn't have the money, or because we wanted to bank it a little bit longer. We've never not sent out a statement, you know what I mean, that explained how much revenue we generated from the sale of their film.
Yep.
And I think the challenge is that a lot of my predecessors in the distribution business played pretty fast and loose with people's, intellectual property.
Yeah.
And as a result, they created a distrust. And so that's kind of what I meant at the onset of my answer, which is that, a lot of that distrust is well placed. And so I think a lot of my job is just convincing filmmakers that not all of us are like that. And honestly, I think it helps that we're based in Minnesota, right?
Yeah.
I'm not playing that glitz and glam game that a lot of people are. A lot of my competitors have offices, on the Strip in LA. They're paying, $78,000 a month in rent for their office, right? My office is part of a sister company's, spillover office space where we pay, a couple $1,000s a month.
All right.
Right? Because we don't need a fancy office to get your film into Best Buy, right? But a lot of these studios that are based in LA and New York, they feel like half the game is the show and the dance.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So I get rid of the show and the dance, and we pass that revenue on to the filmmakers.
You can stay in business.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, that's why we're still around, and a lot of our competitors either aren't around or go through us to get to retail. Cinedigm and RLJ, formerly known as Image, MVD, Shout Factory, all these companies that are competitors of ours either go through us or through someone like us to get their product onto retail shelves.
Mm-hmm. Did I ever tell you my horror story that happened?
Ugh, I'm ready.
So I made a movie 10 years ago, and we financed it independently. But a week into production, we had an amazing cast. We shared some footage, and we sold international and domestic before the movie was even wrapped.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's the dream.
It was amazing.
Yep.
And it was a really good deal. So we had a gross corridor, meaning like every dollar that came in, we got 10% of it, 10 cents of it, no matter what.
Yep.
So it was a sweetheart deal. I guess we had leverage at the time. I was making the movie, and the producers were doing...
Yeah, before costs or anything, just right off the top.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And mostly based on transactional, right? So people would buy it or rent it. We'd get a piece of that. So we get done with the movie. It turned out very well. And our distributor had other folks that were interested. So
they're looking to sub-sell it,
yeah,
sub-license it.
Yep. So eventually sold it to a television network, who's great and who's kind of innocent in this whole thing. But so I'll give you numbers. We made it in the 400s, I think. Our MG from this first distributor was like 500, so we're already like doing great.
In the black?
Yep. He then sold it to this network for $1 million and walked away with $500,000. Yep. And because it was also on a network, we lost all of our transactional.
Oh, because it wasn't transactions.
Yeah. So I made $10,000 for a movie that aired on network TV probably 70, 80 times.
And that guy made a phone call to do that.
Yeah. And they were not in business anymore. He's probably on his private island somewhere spending our money. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's frustrating. And to me, it's also frustrating, right? To hear that story makes me angry because it's not fair business.
Yeah.
But he figured out a way contractually to loop you into this deal.
Yep.
Probably knowing what his plan was intentionally and originally.
Yep.
And to me, that's just not how you should do business.
Yeah.
It's just not the way it works.
I know. And it's water on the bridge. And I'm every now and then I get still mad about it, but lesson learned, and it led to other bigger, better things. So I didn't get into this industry to make a lot of money. I mean, it'd be nice, but
it'd be nice.
I did it for the art and because it felt like a hard challenge to do. But yeah, that was my one horror story, and working with you guys has been the opposite of that. So,
well, that's good. The challenge that I have is that, I think in addition to the bad actors, there are people like you talk about that are intentionally manipulating filmmakers into deals like that.
Yeah.
Tricky.
Yeah. I know. Well, the best we can do is educate people.
Yes.
Shine a light on it.
Yes. And talk to a lot of people before you sign deals. Right. I mean, I think obviously you and every other filmmaker I've talked to, when presented with a deal that will not only recoup their money, but put a little bit in their pocket as well. It's just so tantalizing. Right. And I think that agents and managers and production companies, they feed on that.
The entire industry is predicated on that, on kind of the naivety of eager young filmmakers who want to be loved and to be seen.
Yes.
And you'll put blinders on.
Yep.
Because you're like, all right, somebody wants my stuff, but you're not, reading the fine print or understanding the implications, or maybe not taking the advice of your legal counsel.
There's a local filmmaker here in Minneapolis that after the Twin Cities Film Festival, I reached out to right away and said, hey, I love your film. It kind of bucks the trend in terms of, being a great genre from an independent filmmaker, sci-fi kind of horror vibes to it. And I was like, it's hard to find these in the independent space. We get a lot of people sitting in a small room talking to each other for an hour and a half, and
white wall behind them.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, this is different. I love your set. I love your actors. You pulled in some A-list, what were we calling them? Influencers.
Sure.
To try to get the word out a little bit better. And the reality is that when it came down to it, my projections for revenue on the film were 3 times that of what he had an offer on the table. Right. But 3 times that is as we all know, veritable. It's a risk.
Yep.
I could be wrong.
Yep.
And the offer he had on the table barely made his money back, but also put, a little bit of money in his pocket. And when it came down to it, he said, Jeff, I just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, if I were you sitting in your seat, I'd have a hard time passing up that offer.
Bird in the hand.
Yep, absolutely. I said, now, you and I both know that you might be passing up a lot of money here. I said, but you're telling me that right now, with what's going on with your business, you really need that influx of cash. I said, if I'm sitting in your seat, I take the cash.
Yeah.
You know, so even when it's something that, you know, doesn't benefit me, I'm going to look at it from the filmmaker's perspective and try to make an educated, you know, guess as to what would be best for them.
And next time, that person's going to make another movie, probably. And next time, they're going to take your phone call and be like, I trust that guy.
Yeah.
Didn't work on the last one, but straight shooter. You know?
Yeah, that's the hope, is you plant those seeds and they grow into a little forest, and it's, you know, happy, you know, little warm.
Or they talk to somebody who talks to somebody. I mean, that's how you build a reputation, you know, and that's how you guys have been in business so long and you've been doing what you do for so long, right?
Squeezing that guy and talking him into it and doing the deal, I could have done it. Absolutely. And we might have made him a bunch of money, but it also might have fallen flat on its face and barely made the money back he needed.
Yeah.
Right? Over the course of a year.
Yeah.
You know? So the reality is that I want him to do what's best for the film. And hopefully that works out for everybody.
Yeah, and because you guys have such a, for lack of a better term, good commodity-based business with all those, you know, older titles and whatnot, you don't need to squeeze that guy to make a few extra bucks, right?
That's also the truth, right?
Yeah.
So if you're dealing with a company that's a big company like ours that distributes, over 50 different studios into retail, picking up that one film and squeezing them for $500,000, you know, into our own pocket wouldn't have been worth it.
Right.
Why do it?
Right.
There's no reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other than enriching ourselves for a potential long-term negative vibe out in the industry. You know, like, no thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. You talked about it a little bit, but what do you look for when evaluating a title?
The broadest possible audience with the least amount of marketing money spent.
That's really good. I like that.
The genre doesn't necessarily have to be important. You know, we do everything from Mattel products like Barbie and Thomas the Tank Engine and He-Man and all that stuff. And that obviously has a built-in long-term general broad audience.
Yep.
But we also do, you know, classic horror films from the 60s from Britain, you know what I mean? That we do as Blu-ray collections, right? Those are going to be expensive products to get to because we're selling to a collector. Right, so we try to make a high-end product that's really aimed at the collector's audience. Whereas with, you know, Barbie and Thomas and He-Man, they're great, but you got to make them inexpensive. You have to make them very accessible, and it's an impulse purchase for a parent walking.
It's going to be scratched in 6 months, and
it's almost disposable, right? So you sell it $5 or $10, they're going to use it a few times, and if they lose it or scratch it or whatever, fine, who cares?
Yep. Huh? Yeah, that's pretty brilliant, actually. You know, we talked about the growth of the streaming, kind of all the services, and now there's kind of a little bit of maybe capitulation. Where do you think it's going? I mean, I know if you knew that, you'd be on your own private island somewhere. But if you can look around the corner a little bit, what do you think is going to happen?
I think we're going to see a lot of these platforms that exist today come and go. You know, like Disney now has the package where you get Disney, Hulu, ESPN all as a package. That's the next thing. It's people just packaging it and selling it like a cable package. So it'll be like, you know, whatever the service is, you know, Verizon, you know, whatever it is going to come up with an opportunity where you can get every single streaming platform and the different tiers for the movie channels for different package prices. That's coming very soon. That's the next thing you'll hear about.
Yeah.
And physical goods aren't going anywhere for quite some time. Good example is my parent company is Alliance Entertainment. They sell, you know, approximately 70% of every vinyl record sold every day in America. I mean, the week leading up to Christmas, we sold like 300,000 vinyl albums in 4,000 Walmart stores. Right?
Amazing.
I mean, that's people buying vinyl albums as fast as they can go, and the people on the in the stock room filling up the shelves as fast as they can, so people can buy more. Right? And we're not talking about just like the Bee Gees. We're talking about Olivia Rodrigo,
Taylor
Swift, right? Taylor Swift's last album, we had to stock 4 different versions of one SKU because there was 4 different covers for the one product. Well, guess what? The Swifties wanted all 4 because when you put them on a wall, it made it look like a clock, right?
And they're like $40 a piece too.
Yeah, and they bought all of them.
Yeah.
It was a collector's item. They own all 4 of the original vinyl pressing of her album that, you know, creates a clock mural, right? Either way, we're happy to sell all 4 to them, even though it's the same thing. What's funny is that the first people I think that did that were the people that released Lionsgate when they released Reservoir Dogs. They released Reservoir Dogs, and they made 5 times as much as they usually would of a single release of a feature film, because they made it with each of the different colors.
That's right.
A pink one, a white one,
Mr.
a
Pink,
black
Mr.
one, a
White,
brown one. Yep. And it was the exact same movie, the exact same special features, but with a different color case. People bought all of them.
Yeah, there's a business model there for sure.
Yeah, I think there is. When it comes to certain collectible content, yeah.
What's your advice for a filmmaker that would like to work with somebody like Mill Creek, or I guess maybe any distributor at large?
Number one, don't be afraid to reach out. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people think they've got to know a guy who knows a guy. And I don't mean that from a gender perspective. I just, you know what I mean? In the general sense, know someone who knows someone. And honestly, like, some of the best deals that I've made are when a filmmaker just reaches out via our contact at, or, you know, because it gives me the ability to have direct conversations without a lot of third parties in the middle that are just like that guy you knew, just put money in their pocket for making a connection. And it usually is as typical as these. They just send me an email and say, hey, I got this movie. You want to take a look? And the answer is, yeah, I want to take a look. You know, always. No matter what it is, I'm going to take a look. And if I like it, there's really no need for that third party to be involved whatsoever. But they typically make sure that they're involved all throughout the process, right? So don't be afraid to reach out directly to studios and distributors. If you don't get a response the first time, send another one a couple of days or a week later. I get a lot of submissions, and I always say to people, don't be afraid to be, you know, the squeaky wheel. Like, you know, I will feel guilty if I don't get back to you after a few times, right? So, like, play upon my humanity here. I would say that's one of the big pieces of advice I would have. And also, you know who you want the audience to be when you start the project. Know who you want your audience to be when you're in the middle of your project. Know who you want your audience to be when you're done with your project. I think a lot of people get into it because of the art. But they forget that if they want to support that art, that people are going to have to purchase that art. Right? So make something that not only you want to see, but you think audiences will want to see.
From day zero.
From day zero. Starting with the day you start writing that script. You know, who is your audience?
Do you, or what's your most controversial opinion about the film and TV landscape?
I get a bit cynical when I look at what's happening with the platform produced content. I believe, kind of like we're talking about with AI or anything else, it's just algorithm based. They're looking at what consumers are watching. They're creating a virtual model of what the largest audience is and who's most engaged with their platform. And they're saying, great, they like sci-fi content that has space, you know, in the show, beautiful women in the show, and they want a strong, you know, lead male actor who takes his shirt off, right? Like, they're creating this like list of things that it's got to check all the boxes, and then they reach out and they say, this is what we want. And filmmakers out there who are not necessarily so much about the art are happy to take those jobs and put together a, you know, nuts and bolts production that checks those boxes and has absolutely no heart whatsoever. It's just content, and they're producing it for minutes to be viewed on a subscription platform. So I miss the artistic piece of it, where without that studio telling you what you want, you go out and create something that you think is telling a story that needs to be told. And it's so compelling that studios and broadcasters and everyone else says, I need a piece of that. Right? Because it's good. And it was made with heart. And with the idea that you're trying to tell a story.
And there's a bit of alchemy that can happen too when you're doing it that way, right?
That
you can't predict how everything's going to turn out. But, you know, sometimes if you put a little of this, a little of that in, you might get magic. But if it's all driven by an algorithm, you kind of know what you're going to get already.
You could definitely lose the chance of magic.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the greatest moments in the history of film were ad-libbed. They were accidents.
I don't know if you know Mike Nelson, but director in town, has done some bigger stuff. And he and I were having a conversation, and we feel like our goal as directors is to create an environment on set for happy accidents. The more happy accidents you can have, the better your movie's going to be, because you can't plan for those. But if you put the blinders on and you force everything to be, just what's on the page, you're never going to get that.
When Harry Met Sally has the ending it does because the filmmaker met his wife on set and changed his opinion that, you can't just fall in love with somebody randomly, right? It just totally changed. Was it Rob, what's his name?
Rob Reiner.
Rob Reiner, thank you. He meets this woman on set, and suddenly as they're filming, he's like, oh my gosh, I was a jaded, cynical person, and now I can see that this can happen. Like, you can fall silly in love with someone. And he changed the end of the movie to be a happy ending. And what a different movie and what a different piece of culture we have without that movie having the ending it did, right? Because it was such a meaningful and impactful film at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never heard that story. That's incredible.
Yeah. It was like they were supposed to just like, the end of the movie was supposed to be her seeing her at a coffee shop like years in the future and being like, oh, hey.
Remember that?
Crazy.
Yeah.
But he suddenly he changed his opinion on love and this magic that can occur in real time, because as he was making it, that's what happened. If that algorithm had decided how that film was going to be, he wouldn't have the ability to change the ending. The studio was like, no, it's supposed to it's a sad ending.
Yeah. Well, we were talking earlier too about AI and what that's going to do to the industry and storytelling, and humans at our worst, we're just kind of dumb animals, and we'll just absorb that content, right? Not pay attention to it. I'm worried about, like, if that becomes the norm or the base level, are we going to know the difference anymore?
A good film makes you feel something,
mm-hmm.
right? And I think that what we're talking about with AI and everything else is more about just the ease of production and the inexpensive nature of production that it kind of creates.
Lowers the barrier, maybe.
But I think you miss out a lot of the beautiful humanity that occurs in
mm-hmm.
in a film, and a lot of the art that occurs while making that film with a real human that might be having a variety of different emotions that day that play into that character that creates something special.
Yeah.
You cannot tell me that AI is going to do what Daniel Day-Lewis has done on film.
Right.
It's not going to happen, because what he has done is so unpredictable.
Yep.
And his characters and the way he creates his character and persona is so unpredictable that AI couldn't possibly do so.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the only thing I'm marginally excited for with AI is it's going to open the door for storytellers that maybe couldn't afford to, hire a large cast or crew, and they can tell a story in a different way, and we will find that person, or their storytelling abilities will be exposed to a wider audience, and then we can, maybe give them the tools necessary. So maybe there's a democratizing thing that happens. Like, maybe that's the best case scenario.
Yeah.
Like, I got to find a silver lining somewhere, and maybe that's it.
I'm a very optimistic, happy person, and I would say that absolutely has positive potential impact on the industry.
Mm-hmm.
But I would hope that it's only used in that way.
Yeah. Speaking of optimism, this is being recorded both on video and in audio. So for our audio listeners, they probably have no idea that you're comfortably seated in a wheelchair.
True.
Right now. When I first heard your story of how you came to that situation, I was both frightened and inspired by it. Would you mind telling us the story of your accident?
Yeah, I mean, the Cliff's Notes version is that I was, out fishing with a friend in the middle of nowhere in South Dakota right before my senior year of college. I was a South Dakota State student then, and now a graduate of South Dakota State at this point in time. But I had just gone out fishing in the middle of nowhere with a friend, and on the way, when I was leaving, he told me how to get home because I'd gotten very lost on the way there. And so I was driving on this gravel road, and local water company had been doing some road improvements that didn't have any signage notifying you of the road changes. And so I launched off the top of this, gravel road into a ravine, and my Jeep rolled a few times. I got ejected and landed in a slough. For those of you who don't know what a slough is, that's South Dakota for like swamp.
Right.
About a foot deep of water and mud and reeds and everything else.
Creepy crawly things.
Creepy crawlies. And I laid there that day, and then I laid there the next day before a farmer found me who thought he saw a hubcap he lost down in the middle of the ditch. Turns out it was just my Jeep laying on its side. Everyone came running. Hospital, the ambulance and police all came, running to help me. And I remember it being just extremely chaotic as they were, trying to all figure out how to get me out of this slough. And it was funny. I remember even saying to everyone, like, okay, let's all take a deep breath. Like, everyone take a deep breath. Mm-hmm. No one needs to panic. I've been here for a couple days.
Right.
Slow down. Never looked at me like I was crazy, of course.
Right.
But it was, I try to tell, people say what a horrible experience that must have been. I say, well, honestly, when I hear about all the other people who were paralyzed, when I was in the hospital or in rehab, going through rehabilitation to try to learn how to live my life in a wheelchair. Most people had a terrible accident and then immediately, were rushed to the hospital and all the things. In the 2 days that I laid out there, I came to terms with a lot of things in my own life. And I was pretty certain that I was not going to be found based on the fact there was a lot of blood in the water around me and that I couldn't move my lower half. So I said my goodbyes when I was out in that field. And I think in doing so, when they found me the next day, I had this 2 days, like this very strange ephemeral experience that I wouldn't trade for anything for the world. I mean, I when people talk about, near-death experiences, I don't usually weigh in, but I have a little twinkle in my eye because I remember that night, when I was probably in a very bad place physically. My body was definitely in a terrible shock. I remembered every moment of my life. And when I say every moment, I mean like, it was like I had the ability to tap into any memory since my eyes opened. Like I remember being held by my mother. I remember grabbing my dad's leg at church when I was like 3 or 4 and just learning how to run and walk. I remembered every single smile, laugh that my girlfriend had, done since I met her. Like just every moment was just so vivid. And I just remember thinking like, what a gift this is that I have these memories. And so the result of that, the benefit, I think, to me personally, is that when they did find me, I have never looked at any day as anything but a gift. It's like, I wish everyone could feel that feeling without having to almost die.
Right.
And it's strange how many people I meet that have something in their life that was like a tragic and or not even necessarily tragic, but a life-changing moment in their history where they see my wheelchair and they hear my story and they kind of see a visual representation of pain that they have felt. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people want to kind of share their stories with me, and I think that's also a gift.
Yeah.
Because it's not easy to open up about things that have happened to us in our lives that we couldn't control or weren't necessarily a positive thing. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, when meeting me, immediately feel bad for me because I'm a wheelchair user. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of chuckle that. I chuckle at that, and I kind of just laugh it off because they don't know me, right? And they don't know that this wheelchair was, in many ways, yes, absolutely a challenge, especially if an elevator breaks.
Right.
But the reality is that without it, I wouldn't have this gift and this passion for life that I think a lot of people perhaps miss out on.
Take for granted.
Or take for granted. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And you told the story before about how when you were in the slough, you kept hearing a car drive by, a very familiar car.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, that night is filled with like a million little things, like I said. But my girlfriend at the time had been calling around to friends of mine trying to figure out where I was. It was a strange night for her and I, in the sense that it was 4 years from the day of my best friend dying in a car accident. And so that night, typically in the years since he had passed, I would do something that helped me remember him. I'd go out to the cemetery and, talk to them for a little bit. I'd, just do something that, was kind of just for me. And I think she thought...
you never were going to get literal with it like you did that night.
No.
Yeah.
But she gave me a little, I will say, grace, because I didn't come home when I usually would after work or whatever. And I think she just thought, okay, well, he's just taking a little time for himself. But, 9, 10 o'clock came and she was getting pretty worried. I was not someone who didn't just not call or didn't show up. I'm pretty reliable. Mm-hmm. So she started calling my friends and everything else. And she talked to one of my friends who said, oh yeah, I saw him. He came out and we went fishing after work. She was like, okay, where? Where were you fishing? And so she literally from, 11 o'clock at night until 2 a.m. was driving around town trying to figure out where I was. And 3 times I heard her car drive past the road that I was laying underneath. And it was an 86 Ford Tempo with a very distinct muffler noise that was easy to understand because I worked on that car quite a bit at that point. But I knew that just 50 yards away or whatever it was, that the love of my life was driving past, And the idea that I wouldn't get a chance to say goodbye to her might have helped me in more ways than I even realized, because I stayed awake. Mm-hmm. I kept my hands behind my head just to keep my head above water. Mm-hmm. I tried to like kind of drag myself out of the slough at one point in time, all because I just wanted to get to her.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And how did that story end?
The good news is that the farmer found me, and she was the first person at the hospital. I spent, 3 weeks in the hospital before they were like, well, good luck. And my parents and I were like, well, we need probably a little more assistance than that. So then they found this program for me in Denver at the Craig Hospital that was specifically meant for spinal cord injuries. And it's like an occupational therapy program where you kind of learn how to vacuum and make mac and cheese and
right.
how to live on wheels. One of the first things they taught me was how to do a wheelie, and I thought they were joking. And they were like, no, you have to go up and down curbs all the time, so you need to be able to do a wheelie. I was like, oh, okay, you're not joking. So, they tie a strap to the back of your wheelchair, and they make you try to do a wheelie, and they catch you, if you're about to fall. Kathleen was there with me through all of it. And when I mean all of it, I mean all of it. There's a lot of nights in the hospital where you're just staring at the ceiling, and you're in tears because you're a 21-year-old man who will never walk again.
Right.
So I had to kind of mourn for the life that I knew before my injury. I kind of had to that's in the past, and now this is the new me, right? I'm the same person, but inwardly, I have changed drastically overnight. So she was there with me for all of that. And I mean, there was even times I think when people around her said, you're not married. You're 20 years old, 21 years old. This doesn't have to be for life. And she was more offended by that than anything, right?
It was a challenge for
the heck are you talking about, jerk?
Right.
But it's interesting, right? Because as I've lived my life, with this perspective of being once able-bodied and now, permanently paralyzed, she's gone through it all with me because we got married 2 years after my accident, and we were out in LA for most of our 20s together, just having a great time. And she's an actress, and well, she was an actress. Now I don't think she'd want me to call her an actress now. But then when we got the job offer to move to Minneapolis, we wrung our hands about it a lot because it was kind of saying goodbye to the LA acting dream a little bit in some sense. But we moved here, and as things go, we matured and evolved, and then we had twin boys that are now 13 years old, which blows my mind. And so it is kind of that, strange, crazy love story that everyone hopes for, I think. Because I feel more love for her every single day. You know?
Yeah. What an amazing woman. I mean,
it takes a different kind of strength.
Jeez. Yeah. I love that story so much. Thank you for sharing it. Let's take a half step back. Because you were in that accident, you were kind of led to, helping others and inspiring others, and you caught the attention of somebody, right? That helped you, kind of kicked you off into this career that you're in now. So it was another moment of kind of kismet or luck or what have you.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that went down?
So, after that little rehab stint, I went back to college. I missed, I think, 3 weeks of school.
And you were a theater major, right?
Yep, communication studies, speech and theater. With a heavy emphasis on theater, live theater, and there was a repertory theater company that the college also ran. South Dakota State it's called Prairie Repertory Theater, the traveling theater company, and so it's very, very cool from an experience standpoint, building sets, doing lighting, doing sound, acting, directing, all of it's part of this program, and it was fantastic. And so my senior year of college, I not only was still involved in theater, but they they put a lift into the main theater so I could get on and off stage, and the college did some really cool things for me. I mean, I'd been a part of the program for 3 years, so I knew everyone really well, but they didn't have to do a lot of that. So that was super cool. So I still assistant directed and I directed the student show and did some really cool stuff that year. But the thing that probably set me apart that year is that I started a speech internship for myself. The director of the speech program, let me put together a proposal for me to go out and speak to schools about disabilities and self-esteem and really kind of being your best self. And in the process of doing that, the Sioux Falls Argus Leader did a story about me, about my accident, about, going and talking to schools. And a guy out in LA who's still subscribed to the Sioux Falls Argus Leader read the story and called South Dakota State and said, hey, I need a number for this kid who just graduated. And of course, because it's South Dakota State and it was the year 2000, they were like, oh, here you go. Here's his number and his address. And
Right.
you need his social security number. Here's it all.
Right.
So I get this phone call like a week after I graduated from college, and it was just that classic, like silly story where this guy says, hello, I'm calling from, this film and record label in, Los Angeles. His name was David Catlin. And David says, I'd like to talk to you about a job. And I was like, who is this?
Right.
Like, who is this really?
Yeah.
And after he, convinced me that he was really, in fact, someone calling to offer me a job, I got real serious. And we had about a 40-minute interview on the spot. So just a heads up for, students, sometimes phone calls just come in, be ready.
Never know.
And so we just talked about, what I wanted to do and the fact that I wanted to be in the entertainment industry. And he was like, well, you want to move to LA? And I said, well, yeah, I'm managing this repertory theater company this summer, and then I could join you right at the end of the summer. And he's like, well, how about 2 weeks? And I said, that sounds pretty good too. What's funny is that I went to the director of the theater program and I said, hey, I don't want to do this to you, but I have this job offer that would require me to quit, within the week. And he was like, Jeff, I've just educated you for 4 years to try to work in the entertainment industry. You have succeeded. Take that job.
Get out of here.
I will find someone to help me with your job. So it was really a beautiful thing. And so I went out there and, like I said, I spent most of my 20s working for BCI Eclipse. It was Brentwood Home Video, Eclipse Records. Mm-hmm. So there was a film and television and music distribution group that was bought by Navarre Corporation. And Navarre Corporation was based in New Hope, Minnesota. Mm-hmm. So I started coming to Minneapolis about 3 or 4 times a year to do presentations to the board about my acquisition targets and what stuff I wanted to produce that year, the documentary series that I wanted to produce that year. And what was fun about it is that they thought of us as kind of like this novelty, like, ooh, we own a film and distribution company in LA. Cool.
Right. Yeah.
So this group of folks that I would meet with are always like, yo, that sounds cool. All right. Like you're approved. Go for it. So I'd go out there and get approval to spend a couple $1 million, and then I'd go back to LA and spend it. But it was fantastic. I loved that job and I loved the role. But as the company grew and they kind of diversified their interests, I felt like we were not necessarily getting the same attention we once were, which is why when I got a call from a competitor, Mill Creek Entertainment, who was just, at the time, a very small company, distributing boxes of public domain movies. They sold 50 movie collections that were all public domain movies.
Funny.
And they said, we want to do what we're doing, but we want to sell, like, good stuff. Can you get us good stuff? And I said, what do you mean by good stuff? And they're like, stuff people want to buy.
That's good. Yeah.
And I was like, I think I can do that. So if that's all my job description is get good stuff, I'm ready to take that challenge. So I came to Mill Creek in 2007, and very shortly after made a deal with the Stephen J. Canal Company for his library. And then shortly thereafter that, because the guy who managed the Stephen J. Canal Library, his name was Michael DeBelco. His brother Bob DeBelco managed the Carsey Warner Library. So that was the next deal we made.
Funny.
And then Sony saw these box sets we were doing at retail and taking over huge amounts of the TV section. And they were like, well, we've got a lot of TV. So they made a deal for 66 television series all in one fell swoop with us. And then after that, we kind of started taking over as the category manager for box set television in a lot of retailers. Mm-hmm. So Best Buy would say, hey, we want to do like a section that's all like 80s and 90s TV box sets. Can you do it? And we said, we'll do it all. Take the whole section over. Take over that whole 8 feet in your stores. Mm-hmm. That eventually led us taking over 16 feet in Target, and like just eking out our own existence in the physical retail space.
Yeah.
And while we were doing all that, I was very slowly pushing all of our content to digital platforms because nobody in our office knew what that really was or why we would do it and why it would make us money. But I knew that it was the future. Mm-hmm. So we needed to be entrenched in all those places. So now today we sell direct to every major digital platform as well as all those retailers I just talked about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when you first got hired, you weren't hired to be an acquisition guy, right? You were hired for something else.
Oh, out in LA?
Yeah.
I was hired to be a product development assistant.
Yeah. I
answered phones and I filled out the product development roadmap.
And didn't you have a phone call with some angry producer at some point?
I'll never forget. His name was Jerry Pfeiffer. He used to run a company called Vista Street Entertainment. And Jerry, while a very nice guy, made really bad movies. Vista Street Entertainment, you can Google it. They're bad. I mean bad. And he called me one day and he was just incensed because he thought we were pirating one of his films. He thought we were distributing one of his films and not paying a royalty and that we didn't have the rights to do so. And I let him rant and rave about it for at least 20, 30 minutes before I, softly and carefully interjected that the film he was worried about has just had the same title as another film we did have the rights to. And how, I think that if we worked together, it could actually be a lot better for both of us. And he thought that sounded pretty good. And he was really apologetic for, complaining to me. And my boss, turns out, was standing right behind me for a lot of that call and said, Jeff, why don't you come in my office? And I thought I was getting fired. And he said, no offense, kid, but I think you're a lot better with your mouth than a spreadsheet. And I said, thank you, I think,
Sounds like some noir line in a screenplay.
It totally does. And he said, what if I'm going to start sending you to film festivals and conferences. I want you to be our acquisitions guy. So I Googled acquisitions and see what that meant. And next thing you know, I was in France, at a show called MIPCOM. That's kind of like the antithesis of the film festival there. It's like where you actually go and make deals with companies.
A market.
It's a real market. And that's where I found He-Man. So one of my first shows ever doing acquisitions, I ran into a company called Entertainment Rights out of the UK that had bought the entire Filmation library. And I was rolling past their booth, and I stopped. And without really even understanding how deals work, I was like, I want that.
Yeah.
And they're like, what do you want? And I was like, the whole Filmation library. And they're like, oh, do you know what that is? And I was like, considering I grew up watching He-Man every single day after school, I'm pretty familiar,
I have the power of Grayskull.
Yep.
Give me
He-Man, She-Ra. But then the classic library, like Groovy Ghoulies and all these other shows that they had done in the 60s and 70s that were just hits. So I said, I want to do all of it. And they were like, well, sir, not to be rude, but that would cost you millions of dollars. I was like, that's okay. We're going to do it. We're going to make a deal. And I'm telling you right now, we're making a deal, and we'll figure out what the price needs to be. So I came back to the office and I said, I did it, guys. I got us a ton of content, and I spent my budget. And they were like, well, excuse me? Like, that budget was for the year. And I was like, yeah, and I got us a year's worth of releases. Let's go. And they thought I was a little crazy, and they thought that was probably a big risk for my first conference to go and spend my entire year's budget. Because I spent a couple $1,000,000 at that show.
Yeah.
Without having any idea what I was doing. But I knew there was an audience for that content. I knew there was a collector's audience for that content. A company called Rhino Records that no longer exists had released Transformers as these compilation, of like 5-6 episodes a piece, and then they did like a collection of like the whole season 1, and they had sold like crazy. And so I knew that they'd kind of set this expectation for consumers that more of this was to come. And so when we did He-Man, we made it so the collector's collector. Like, I literally sat with Lou Scheimer, the creator of all these Filmation shows, in his living room for weeks. We sat and went through every piece of material he had from the archives, like all of the interviews he had. And then I said, wow, we need to update this. So we did 16 half-hour documentaries with everyone who ever worked for Filmation, who ever worked on these shows, and we talked to them individually and as a group, and we did Comic-Con promotions. We brought the whole team to Comic-Con to talk about the creation of Filmation and the production of all the shows, and we just went all in. And the response from consumers was also all in. I mean, we sold, literally millions of copies of those He-Man box sets that we did. So it, to me, just kind of was the spark that lit the fire that still exists, in terms of my career and my passion.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure there's a timing thing when that, the younger fans of a property are coming into a certain part of their life.
Yeah, they were all starting to turn, 25 and 30 years old at the time.
Yeah, starting to get a little disposable income.
Yep.
And that's probably the target demo for a project like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. That's a fun story. I was a He-Man kid myself. So
I was definitely a He-Man kid. Dungeons and Dragons was the next one I did. I went to Disney, who owned the rights to Dungeons and Dragons, and that's actually kind of a funny story because I was in LA. No, I was in LA and I drove to Vegas for a show called at the time it was the Video Software Dealers Association. VSDA is what it was called. And I went down there for VSDA, and I went to a party that was being held for Sundance. And I wasn't even invited to this party, but being in a wheelchair, just so you know, if you go to parties in Vegas in a wheelchair and you're in a suit, they just let you in. You just say, where's the accessible entrance? And they just let you in.
One of the perks.
Just so you know. So I go to the Sundance party, and I was like, well, where's the accessible entrance? And then they're like, here you go, sir. And I went in. And
there's not enough people that use it, so they're not going to have somebody guarding that.
Yeah, there's no guard.
Yeah.
So I go to the Sundance party that I wasn't invited to, that I shouldn't have been at. Sorry, everyone at Sundance. And I'm sitting there and I'm hanging out with these two guys, and they're just really fun, nice guys. And we're having a couple drinks, and they're like, what are you off to next? And I was like, I don't know, I'm just playing it by ear. They're like, we got a party, you're coming with us. So I go to the party with these guys. Spend a couple hours there. Pretty soon it's 2:33 in the morning. I'm like, you guys, I have meetings in 3 hours, so I have to go back to the hotel.
Yeah.
So I get back to the hotel. As I'm getting out of the taxi, I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot to ask, what are your names? Or, Dan and I think it was Eric. Dan and Eric, what do you guys do? And they're like, oh, we work for Disney. We're in the licensing division. Interesting, I said. Can we talk on Monday? Right? So then I call them up Monday morning. We spent 30 minutes talking about our exploits that evening. And then the next 10 minutes, it was like, so can we work together? So this guy, his name is Dan Silverberg. I said, you have this show in the catalog that I don't think you're doing anything with. It's called Dungeons and Dragons. And he's like, oh yeah, we totally have that in the catalog. What do you want to do? I want to put it in a box set and kind of recreate the magic of He-Man. And next thing you know, we had a deal, and we sent them millions of dollars in royalties on that one show alone. Right. So to me, it's not only being ready for that guy to call that offers you a job, but it's being a kind, honest, and decent person to the people you meet in the event that they work for Disney licensing and they can, change your trajectory.
Yeah. I mean, that's some good life advice.
Yeah.
There, just be a normal human being. Don't always have an ask, right?
You don't always have to have an ask.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can just be in the moment.
Yeah.
And enjoy yourself.
Yeah. Any other advice you'd give to a younger self?
Hey. Any other advice to give to a younger self?
Sounds
start
like
that 401k early.
That's actually good. That's probably the most practical advice you could give. Yeah.
Start that 401k early.
Yeah, I think that's acceptable. Any tools or technology that you use in your day-to-day life that you feel like has been a game changer for you?
What's funny is that my projections process is very similar today as it was 20 years ago. Cast list, where do they fall in the star meter rating, and combined, how do they, equate?
And star meters and IMDb kind of
I was just using it
arbitrary rank, but just for the people that don't know. Yeah.
Just for the arbitrary ranking that it gives them. But it's not necessarily just the star meter rating. It's really just, kind of like collectively,
Zeitgeisty.
Yeah. Where are they at, in terms of their career? It's a lot of it's gut instinct combined with reality-based comps, right? So we will look at every film that's submitted. We will see, how many films like this have come out in the last 3 years? And in the last 3 years, how did those titles perform? Did they have similar casts, similar budgets, similar, distribution intentions in terms of how they were released? If it's a Paramount Plus release, I can't comp against it, right? But if it's a Maverick Top Gun, I can comp against it because it had all the windows, right? Yep. So we look for variety of things, collectability, right? To me, that's the biggest word these days. There's no reason to release every movie on DVD and Blu-ray these days. It needs to have a collectible aspect to it, right? You really want the collectors, the fans, to be the ones who are going to buy it.
Well, the digital cost is going to zero, and it is on some platforms via advertising, so you have to find that thing that makes it special.
You have to find that thing that makes it special. Right now we're working on the Blu-ray box set release for Documentary Now. The reason we're doing that is because I love that show, right? And the whole point of the show is that it's this long-running documentary, that has thousands of episodes, And so we want the box set to be on the joke, right? So we want this box set to feel and look like a Ken Burns, expensive collection. And it's going to have an intro with Fred, and it'll have all kinds of behind the scenes stuff that's never been seen before. But we want the collectors and the fans of that show to see that box set and laugh.
Right.
They're like, oh my gosh, they released this and it looks just like a Ken Burns box set, and it says it has 2,000 episodes included. Even though we all know there's only 28.
Yep.
That's the. I like doing stuff like that. It's fun, and it hopefully catches that zeitgeist, that enthusiasm from the fans. I want them to know I'm a fan too when we release stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's why people want to keep working with you too, right? Because
hopefully.
It's gonna be hilarious though if you release it like that, and you're gonna get the Ken Burns fans buying it and being like,
and then complaining,
"What the hell did I
just not have 2,000 episodes?"
Right.
That documentary seemed like it was about the Eagles, but you called them the Blue Jean Committee,
right?
A
remake of Grey Gardens with two dudes, what? Yeah. I would buy that. That sounds hilarious. I know you're not a public figure, but is there any place anybody can go to learn more about you or Mill Creek?
There's the Mill Creek website, Mill Creek Ent, short for entertainment. Seemed like a lot to type in, so we made it shortened. Mill Creek Ent. But what's funny is that our website's really, it's to us, the most important thing is that people buy the movies we distribute and that people are interested in the television shows we distribute. It's never been the foremost thing in my mind to make Mill Creek the brand. The movie is the most important part. And I think that's probably why, some distributors get themselves in a little trouble. They just try to make it all about the brand. Mm-hmm. Brands come and go. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's really, for me, it's about the movie. It's about the TV show. If people start following along with Mill Creek because they like what we do, fantastic. Mm-hmm. Right? That's great. Mm-hmm. We've got I will say, a very bullish view on the future. Mm. Like you were talking about earlier with, Warren Buffett. My favorite one that's in that vein is Carl Icahn, mm-hmm. obviously a very wealthy individual. When he was buying the LA Times, someone said, "Why would you buy, a dying, format like that?" He goes, "Well, gentlemen, it's going to be a very long and very profitable death." And I don't think physical goods are dying, but I'm going to be in them for a long time for the same reason that we're still selling a lot of vinyl. Because the reality is that if you go online today and you watch your favorite show, you could be 2 episodes in, then you find out tomorrow that Netflix did not renew the rights and that it's no longer available to stream, right? So what do? Yep. You go online and you start looking for it. Oh, wow. The studio who owns it hasn't made another streaming deal yet. They're letting it rest to hopefully engage with a streamer at a higher price in 6 months to come, mm-hmm. right? So what do you do in the meantime? Well, you can go look for the physical goods, but Best Buy doesn't even carry physical goods anymore. So you got to go to Amazon and try to find your favorite box set on Amazon. You get it home. You're so happy that Mill Creek put this out. You're like, wow, thanks Universal for making a deal with Mill Creek to put this Blu-ray box set in stores. You buy it. You watch the whole thing at home. You're like, oh, no wonder I love this show. It's the best thing on television, or best thing that was on television. Mm-hmm. A year later, you see that it's streaming on Hulu. So you're like, you know what? I love that show, and I just watched it last year, but I'm going to watch it again. So
I know
go to Hulu.
Going at. Yep, keep going.
You start watching. You're like, well, wait, what happened? They skipped an episode. The point is that they're not available, right? So if you're a big fan of the show and you want to watch every episode, you can't.
Yeah.
So I like physical goods. It is a collectible format, but also is the only way, truly, you'll ever be able to watch that show and know it for as long as you want to. And, I mean, obviously, at some point in time, you may want to give your collection to someone.
Yeah.
Try giving your iTunes collection to someone,
Yeah.
Not easy.
Nope. No. Yeah, some hoops you have to jump through to make that happen.
Bruce Willis actually is the one who found that out and made it public news about a decade ago or so. He was redoing his will and wanted to gift his iTunes library to his estate and descendants.
Back when you had to buy the songs and the albums.
Yeah, and he had like 40,000 songs. Right? So not a small library. And they informed him at the time, like, oh, we totally understand what you're talking about, but you cannot gift that to anyone. You don't own that music. It's like, what are you talking? I bought all. No. You have a perpetual license as long as you're alive. Mm-hmm. You don't own anything. Mm-hmm. Same thing with all the digital platforms where you're buying your movies. You're buying a license to watch that on their platform. You don't own anything.
Yeah.
But if I sell you a Blu-ray box set, that's yours, baby. Mm-hmm. I don't have any claim to it. There's no chance of me coming to your house and asking for me to get it back. I think there is something to it when it comes to like the librarian in me that says, if you want to own something, I'd buy a physical copy.
Yeah, and until our consciousnesses are uploaded into the cloud, we're gonna want stuff.
We're gonna want stuff. Yeah, until we can just go back and watch the movie again in our brain. Yeah.
I hope I'm gone by that point. My grandchildren can deal with that. Yeah. Well, thank you for being here. Thanks for having me. This was awesome.
It's fun.
Great to hang out again.
Good to see you.
Yeah. Well, that's the episode, so thank you for watching and listening. We put a lot of effort into producing these, so if you happen to enjoy them, it would mean the world to us if you could like and subscribe on your favorite platforms. Thank you.